My name is Kathy Eastman, Russell's aunt. I remember a perfect day I got to spend with Russell as a toddler. He was the first baby born into our family who lived close to all of us, and that made him extra special, and he was so incredibly adorable. I remember I would talk about him to just about anyone who would listen to me. I was taking a photography class at the time and had an assignment to photograph a child. I knew right away that I wanted to photograph Russell, or RJ as we called him. While nothing specific stands out, I just remember what an amazing day it was for Mike and I to spoil him like aunts and uncles should. We bought him bubbles and a ball and later went out for ice cream with him. I still remember vividly how it was a sunny, beautiful day and the sky was blue, and it was so special to get that one-on-one time with him while capturing all the special moments of that day on film. Our family kept growing after Russell had captured our hearts, and it became harder and harder for us to have those special, intimate moments with all of the nieces and nephews. So I really treasure that I got that wonderful day with RJ.
Hi, I'm Russell's Uncle Randy, and I would like to tell you about one of the memories that I see when I think of Russell. We just finished our game at Snyder Park, and we were walking towards Ayfield to see if we could catch the end of Russell's game. As we got closer, we could see the game was over, and Robert, Lisa, and Tara, and Russell were walking towards us. Robert's carrying the equipment bag, and Tara's wearing her Tide Chevrolet shirt. I think it was a Tide Chevrolet shirt. And Lisa's carrying all the coats. And Russell is out and kind of out in front of him, and he's looking over his shoulder, and he's just jabbering away, and they are just all cracking up. I don't know why that scene stands out for me, because with Russell it happened all the time. I think it was because I witnessed one of those Bruce perfect times when they were all living in the moment and having a great time. Russell created a lot of those. Mr. Russell?
Hi, I'm Megan Bruce.
And I'm her brother, Ben Bruce.
Most of our childhood memories would not be complete without a story that included our older cousin Russell. He was just like a brother to us. He was always a leader, seeking an adventure and making the best time out of any situation we could ever get ourselves into.
Some of our best memories of Russell are growing up in the same neighborhood together, playing basketball, riding bikes, but most of all, exploring the woods behind his house.
One particular summer when Russ was about 13 and Ben and I were about 8, he led us on a crazy adventure we would never forget.
Up in the woods behind his house, Russ had this crazy idea to dig a tunnel from his backyard to our backyard. The tunnel would be big enough to ride our bikes through. It was going to be a secret passageway that only Megan, Tara, Russell, and I would know about.
Looking back on Russ's plan, there's no way we would have ever been able to accomplish this. But his enthusiasm and determination to finish the tunnels couldn't be denied. We all believed in our older, wiser cousin's creative ideas to do anything. Even though the attempt at the tunnels turned into one giant hole in the middle of the woods, we still spent most of the summer trying to accomplish Russ's grand idea.
He made us all believe that anything is possible and that we could do it together. This is just one of many stories about our great cousin RJ, who will always be our leader.
Hi, my name is Kelly Dirksema, and I'm Russell's cousin. And I wanted to share a memory with you of us going up to Canada when we were kids to visit our Aunt Carol and Uncle Bruce, and we'd camp on their property every year. It was a really great memory that I share with all my cousins. And the very last summer that we ever went, it was actually just Russell, Tara, Brandon, and I out of the cousins. So it was pretty special to get that one-on-one time with them. I must have been about 10 years old at the time, and Russell was about 16. So since Russell's about 6 years older than me, I really kind of got a kick out of being able to get to know him better, and felt pretty cool to be hanging out with a much older teenager like that. Tara had braided pigtails for me. French braids, the tight braids that go along your scalp, tightly woven to your head. She'd mastered it, and I was pretty impressed with her braiding skills. At any rate, some point later that day, I'd bent down to reach for the zipper in my tent, and somehow managed to unzip the tent zipper right up into the braided hair on the top of my head. And leave it to me. I stood there flailing my arms and shouting because it was stuck so tight I couldn't get it free. And Russell was the one who heard me shouting and came running over. And I'm pretty sure at first he just laughed hysterically while assessing the situation and then said, "Stay here, I'll go get something to get it out with." Obviously, I was going to stay there because I was stuck, but I specifically remember thinking to myself that it's a good thing that Russell found me like that instead of my older brother, because surely he would have just laughed and teased me and then left me to fend for myself. So I was so glad that my cousin Russell was going to save the day. Before long, he came running back, and I was so ready to be freed from the zipper. He was literally going to be my hero by this point. So when he stopped a few feet short, I was sure he's going to be readying whatever tool he was going to use to free me until he pulled out a camera and started just shooting away. I just love this fond memory of Russell because it summarizes our relationship in so many ways. He was always able to give me that feeling that he would be there to save the day, even if in the end we just ended up laughing hysterically. He was certainly mischievous, fiercely loyal, and someone I loved laughing with.
I'm Jane, Russell's aunt. One of my favorite memories of Russell was when he was about 4 years old. He was visiting his grandpa and had watched him pruning some bushes. When Grandpa wasn't looking, Russell decided to do some pruning of his own. My dad took me outside to see all of his faucets with the garden hoses cut off about 2 feet from the spigots. Another recent memory I have of Russell was at his cousin Melissa's wedding. Throughout the afternoon and evening, Russell, along with his other cousins, were all chipping in and trying to help out with whatever needed to be done. At the end of the wedding, he was helping me with the glassware. Every time I would pick up a crate, he would come over and take it from me and carry it out to the trailer. It seemed like every time I saw him that night, he was either helping with stuff or laughing and visiting with cousins and family. I think that Russell was such a good father because he knew what kinds of mischief little boys could think up. And as a father and as a nephew, Russell has shown me how important being part of this family is. Thank you, Russell.
The next memory is from Rob, Russell's dad.
I've got a story that speaks to Russell's fondness for a good practical joke. One day after coming home from work, I was approaching the front door and I reached out and there was a snake over the front door. And I jumped back about 3 feet and I could hear Russell and his friend Jason across the street hiding in the ditch, just laughing as hard as they could laugh. And when I turned around, they just took off and running full speed and still laughing, and they knew that they were in big trouble because I'm deathly afraid of snakes, and he knew it. So he thought he was running for his life, but when they finally found him, we were all laughing, and it just speaks to his mischievous nature and how he likes a good practical joke. One other story that I like is when he was in high school, took him and his friend Scott Zufelt over to Bellevue for Mariners tryouts. And when we got there, there was all these college-age kids that were there to try out for the Mariners, and Russell and Scotty were probably the youngest ones there. And all these college-age kids were, when they'd get up to bat, they'd try to knock the ball into the next county. Some of them could. And when it was finally Russell's turn to get up, he figured out not exactly what they were looking for. And the scout that was pitching, he threw Russell a pitch, and the pitch came back past the scout's ear about 90 miles an hour. He could hear the ball screaming as it went past his ear. And he threw him another one, and then hit another one, line drive right past him. And after the tryouts, the scout told Russell, he says, "You're pretty young, you're still in high school, so we'd like to see you next year." So he got invited back, but as circumstances happened, he never made it back. But it goes to show his nature of figuring things out and how smart he was.
I'm Brandon, Russell's cousin. For several summers when we were kids, all of the Bruce kids' families would go spend some time at our Aunt Carol and Uncle Bruce's property in British Columbia. This was always a really fun trip, and it was always a lot of fun to get together with all the cousins. I remember we would head out when it was still dark and add to the caravan of family cars with car-top carriers as we headed north to the Port Angeles Ferry. One year, when I was probably about 7 or 8, Russell was probably about 11 or 12, we were all parked waiting for the ferry just after sunrise. The kids were able to get out of the cars and go around checking in and talking with the cousins in different cars. Bagel sandwiches and little travel-sized cereal boxes got passed out while we waited for the ferry. Russell came up to me and said, "Come on, let's go inside the ferry terminal." We walked into the little building where people were standing around sipping coffee and looking out on the water. I remember inside had a sort of green tint to it, olive meets seafoam green benches under fluorescent lights. For me at that age, it was exciting to even be a little bit away from the rest of the family, and especially to be with my oldest cousin just wandering around. We were only in the ferry terminal for about a minute or so when Russell got a big grin and told me he had an idea. I was more than interested, assuming he had a great plan to harass our sisters or play a joke on one of our cousins. "Okay, what do you want to do?" I asked. "Just go stand over there," he said, and pointed towards the door that led out to our families. I walked the 15 feet or so. As I stood there, I began to panic, wondering what he was going to do. I was in way over my 7-year-old head now. I wanted to be back in the trunk of a car having a banana where it was safe, instead of serving as an accomplice to whatever was about to happen. I couldn't leave my spot, though. If I did, Russell's plan might fall apart and it would be my fault. I had to prove to Russell I could hang. My heart was thumping and my legs wanted to run as I watched him approach a couple in their 30s. "What is he doing?" I kept asking rapidly in my head over and over again. My 11-year-old cousin walked up to the man, wrapped his arms around him, and said, "Daddy, Daddy, why did you leave me and Mommy? Where have you been?" My mind was spinning. He must know this guy, but why was he calling him Daddy? The man awkwardly stepped back and kept saying, "I'm not your daddy. I think you're confused. Are you looking for your parents?" Russell let go of him and walked that super fast walk straight back to where I was standing, right past me and out the door. I followed, giggling uncontrollably. Once we got halfway back to the cars, we stopped and laughed. "Do you know that guy? Who is that?" I asked. Russell laughed and said, "Do you see that lady's face? She didn't know what was going on." I couldn't stop laughing. Half relieved and half still nervous, the whole rest of the ferry ride, I felt like the coolest person on the planet. In a weird way, I felt more grown up because of it. I was quietly proud that I had been part of something so amazing. It was a juvenile prank that I only witnessed, but I felt invincible because Russell had chosen me to pull this off with. Russell was the oldest of the Bruce cousins. I always looked up to him and wanted him to be impressed with me. I think Russell always had a lot going on just under the surface and saw the world a little differently than most. I think that morning he saw an opportunity for a little excitement and took it. I was lucky enough to be there when he did. Even now I'm impressed with the balls and creativity it took to do that.
My name is Kelsey Zane, and I'm one of Russell's cousins. I remember Russell being quiet and reserved, much like his dad and Uncle David, but I always got the sincere impression that he was fiercely loyal, and if I needed anything, much like the rest of my family, he would help as much as he could. It was also clear how much he cared about his little boy Nolan, and how proud he was of him. I consider myself lucky to have known Russell. His quiet confidence, sense of humor, and loyalty are things I will never forget. Even in passing, he is able to teach us a thing or two, like that every day isn't guaranteed, and that we are lucky to be part of a family that is so caring and supportive in someone's time of need. No family Thanksgiving, birthday, wedding, or camping trip will be the same. We love you and miss you, Cousin Russ.
Hi, I'm Melissa. I'm Russell's cousin. As long as I can remember, I always looked up to Russell. There was something magnetic and fearless about the way he bulldozed his way through life. As kids, it was always more exciting when Russell was around. Being the oldest cousin, we'd all follow him around in a pack, all of us excited, and maybe some of us a little bit scared for the adventure that he always seemed to create. Usually, a successful adventure was marked by either Brandon screaming, Ben and Kelly crying, or a group giggle fit. As time has gone by, I haven't spent the amount of time that I wish I had with him, but some of my most recent memories have also been some of my best. On the night of my wedding, I found myself sitting on a log down on the beach with Russell, chatting about the day, life, just catching up and laughing. I realized that I'd never stopped looking up to him, and it was because of the person that he always had been. Funny, creative, wicked smart. The kind of guy that would have us rolling on the floor laughing or getting all the cousins to swear to some secrecy pact for something mischievous we had done. The guy that had battled back from seemingly insurmountable obstacles to be the cousin, friend, brother, son, and father that we were all fortunate to share our lives with. So, to the guy that introduced me to the sport of sandwich frisbee, Boys to Men, and Madrona tea, you were courageous, bold, hilarious, and you'll never be forgotten.
My name is Tara. I'm Russell's little sister. It was Memorial Day weekend 2005. We had planned a cousin's camping trip up at the Hoh River. Megan, Ben, Kelly, Brian, Russell, Erica, and I, along with some friends, were all hanging around the campfire one night. A teenage kid from a neighboring site decided to wander over to ours. It became apparent pretty quickly that he was there just to score some beer. Most of us just ignored him in the hopes that he would take the hint and go away. We continued on chatting, laughing, telling stories, when all of a sudden Russell's looking directly at this kid and says loudly in his deep, gravelly voice, "Kick rocks." I don't think anyone expected it, because we all just looked at each other in shock. Needless to say, that kid hightailed it out of there, and we never saw him again. I don't think I've ever laughed as hard as I did that weekend. Anytime the cousins get together, we always end up laughing so hard it hurts. If you really think about it, most of the time the reason for that laughter is Russell. We love telling our stories about Russell and what he made us do when we were younger. All of the cousins who spent time with Russell growing up have at least one story that involves them doing something completely ridiculous with him. Being his sister, I'm sure I have more than my fair share. Russell always had some grand idea and a way of convincing us that it was the best thing we've ever heard. Whether it was trying to find a supposed lake deep in the woods or digging a network of tunnels underneath our neighborhood, it was always Russell's idea, and I was always willing to go along. I just want to say thank you, Russell, for all the stories and the laughter you've given all of us.
The next memory is from Joe Mitchell, Russell's friend. We were going to see Roger Waters in Seattle, and I had met him, Josh, and Milo on the ferry. It was supposed to be a surprise for me, but he was so excited about seeing Roger that he just couldn't keep it to himself. We spent the ferry ride with my wife shushing him as he just sat there, smiling like a little kid. Russell always seemed to be a big kid at heart. He would put in a hard day's work, but he worked to live instead of the other way around. He knew how to have fun and relax, even when the rest of us couldn't quite slow down. He took my wife and oldest son out fishing when I couldn't, and didn't think anything of helping my son as if he were his own. He was one of only a handful of guys that my youngest son would interact with, and one of only 3 that could pick him up. He helped me install a new roof on my house, and thought my wife's cooking of breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 2 days in a row was sufficient reimbursement for his time, and at that point I had only met him a few times. The man had a huge heart and shared it with everyone around him. We were all better for knowing him, and I regret not knowing him better than I did. As my wife put it, for someone that didn't grow up with us and wasn't a part of the original group, he fit in like he was there from the start. Thinking about that, I do believe there was an empty space I couldn't see before, but now it's only too obvious when it isn't filled. I always looked forward to fishing and hunting with Russ. He was one of the few that was interested in going bow hunting, and only one of a couple that knew where all the good fishing holes were. Every time I hear Moby Dick being pounded out on the drums, I will remember Russ shouting out that the drummer for Spike and the Impalers is the reincarnation of John Bonham. Every time my youngest son brings out his tools and remembers that his Uncle Russ gave them to him, I will remember how great he was with children and how giving he was. Every time our sons play together, I will remember that Russ was a father I could count on for keeping my son in line, just as he kept his own, and I trusted him with that. I will miss Russ and all the memories that we will never get to make, but I will forever cherish the memories that we did.
I'm Lisa. I'm Russell's mom. There are so many stories to tell about Russell that it's difficult to choose just one. But I think that's a story that I want to share as the last time I saw Russell. It was on December 29th, and Nolan and Autumn and Russell had come to our house to celebrate Christmas with us and Tara and Drew. We'd eaten dinner and opened gifts, and I was sitting on the couch next to Russell. And I launched into my usual cross-examination. How's work? Is your truck running yet? How's Nolan doing in school? Have you and Autumn settled in yet? It was pretty much a routine with us, and he'd duck his head and he'd answer with fine, no, not yet, Nolan's fine, getting there, and so on and so on. But it was my last question that I will hold in my heart, and it's not one that I typically asked. I said, so, life's good. Are you happy? And he looked up, and he looked me in the eye, and he smiled, and he said, yes, I am. My last words to Russell, as they were leaving, and I was hugging him, I said, I love you, and he hugged me back, and he said, I love you too. That was Russell's gift to me, to know he was happy, and that he loved us, and he knew that he was loved.